This is a major concern for the Toronto Raptors, as one of the centerpieces in that Pascal Siakam trade ahead of this year's trade deadline was Bruce Brown. And obviously that deal was made to acquire draft capital to open up some flexibility for the future for this Toronto Raptors team. And the team had the opportunity to flip Bruce Brown once again for another first round pick, the New York Knicks in particular, in this year's NBA draft. However, the team opted to keep Bruce Brown, thinking his value would remain the same ahead of this year's trade deadline. However, recent sort of reports and just eye test out there on the court reveal that this probably isn't still the case. So we're going to break down the concerning fact that Bruce Brown might be walking for nothing in the offseason, as well as a little update regarding Gary Trent Jr.'s future contract and Jordan Nwora getting some praise and looking at him as a potential keeper for the Toronto Raptors. So lots of stuff to sink our teeth into. So let's dive in the first topic of discussion. First thing we're taking a look at is Bruce Brown potentially walking in the offseason. Now, anyone that's been watching or at least following the highlights, subscribe to Raptors Digest, keeping up to date on the latest Toronto Raptors news, kind of knows that the Bruce Brown experiment hasn't really worked for the Toronto Raptors. His stats haven't been horrific, haven't been, crazy bad since he's joined the Toronto Raptors. I mean, with the Indiana Pacers was averaging 12 points, that's only down to 9.4. The rebounds are down. He's only shooting 27% from behind the three-point line, which is pretty gross, pretty ugly, but they haven't just completely fallen off a cliff. So that's one thing that might be taken as a little bit of a positive, but he's a guy that, is 27 years old, doesn't really fit exactly what the Toronto Raptors want to do, and he's kind of been like a square peg in a round hole for the Toronto Raptors. He doesn't really fit, around when Scotty Barnes was playing healthy, the lack of shooting, stuff like that. And now with Gary Trent Jr. and Grady Dick in the lineup, hasn't really been fitting perfectly. And now the Raptors haven't really been able to maximize, haven't really been able to elevate his trade value to close out this season. And that's what the Raptors in a bit of a conundrum. And Michael Grange sort of addressed this in a very speculative sort of piece. Not really a lot of reporting in this one from Michael Grange, but basically said that Bruce Brown, he's a pending free agent unless the Raptors pick up his $23 million player option or team option his contract calls for next season. So he'll be looking for a new deal somewhere else. The Raptors could be in that mix, but Brown will have plenty of suitors at the mid-level and might be hard to keep as an awkward fit around Gary Trent Jr. as well as Grady Dick. And if the latter are back, I'd lean in towards no, him potentially being brought back. Again, Michael Grange, I don't think this is actual particular insider information, even though he is pretty locked in with the Raptors front office. And maybe some will say, oh, Grange thinks he's gone, he's definitely coming back. But basically what this reveals to me in the language used by Grange and just from us, from common sense Raptors fans, are the Raptors going to buy in? Are they going to pick up a $23 million player option for a guy that, again, even looking at his entire season this year, 6'4", plays the position that the Raptors are kind of loaded at right now, PG shooting guard and small forward, right? Not able to space the floor really to an extreme extent, can be a role player, can play off of different guys, but is he a player that you really want to bring back for $20+ million? Maybe if it ensures you keep him, if it ensures he's back with this team and you don't want to let the asset walk, but it doesn't seem like at least Grange is thinking, and I think a lot of Toronto Raptors fans believe, even though it's it's a 1-year deal, it makes sense for the Toronto Raptors to pick up that team option at the $23 million number mark. So that leaves the Toronto Raptors in a tough spot because one, that could just lead Bruce Brown to walk. And maybe that's the better option than giving him $23 million for next season. But you factor in the Raptors could have had a first-round pick. And not a horrible first-round pick either. I mean, the Knicks have been really good, but they're not, the Boston Celtics. That's early 20s, mid-20s. It's still a solid draft pick in this year's NBA draft. So they could have had an asset such as that first-round pick for him. And it's a sunk cost, I guess, at this point. We can't be stressing about stuff like that. But the Raptors trading away Pascal Siakam for a pick that turned into Kelly Olynyk and Agbaji, which, again, I don't think it's horrible. It's a good return for that late first. But then a future protected Indiana pick as well as, this year's Indiana pick, which could be sold and stuff. I don't know. For Pascal Siakam, it feels pretty light. It feels like not the greatest of sort of pieces in return for the Toronto Raptors. Then you have an asset where you could have cashed in some value for him ahead of this year's trade deadline. I don't know, man. It just sucks to see because if he does end up going into free agency. The Raptors don't pick up that team option. There's no world he comes back to the Toronto Raptors. It doesn't make sense for his game. There's going to be a bunch of teams interested in picking him up at the mid-level, sort of the mid-level exception number. I mean, why on earth would he stay with the Toronto Raptors? It just doesn't make sense, especially if the team refused to give him that $20 million number. So, I don't know. It seems like there's a real possibility the Raptors could get nothing for Bruce Brown. Maybe, trading him at the NBA draft, that value could be there, but we'll see. We'll see how that all plays out. Let me know if you guys are concerned about Bruce Brown's future with this team. The next thing we're taking a look at is a little quick update on Gary Trent Jr. Again, update/speculation. I know people don't like Michael Grange, and people are going to complain in the comments, yada, yada, yada. But Grange did address Gary Trent Jr.'s future with this team as well, and he's been a hot topic of discussion, and he discussed how at this point it would be a mistake to let Gary Trent Jr. walk for nothing as a free agent. So barring something crazy happening, I would predict he'll return on a deal that not at all is different from the one he just is finishing up with. Let's say 3 years, $60 million, which keeps him around and keeps him tradable. So $20 million per year for Gary Trent Jr., that's not a number that I'm going to, pull my hair out, scream at Masai Ujiri if he's brought back for. But the Raptors are trying to have flexibility. They're trying to have these sort of things. And as Grange brings up, $20 million per year is still tradable. It's an interesting number, but that is a lot for Gary Trent Jr., who is extremely inconsistent, even though overall he's a net positive three-point shooter. But comparative to other guys in the NBA, I mean, Kevin Huerter, does a little bit more out there on the court, is also inconsistent as a three-point shooter himself, is making $15 million per year. Again, sign this contract. The earlier you sign your contracts, the less the salary cap is up and things like that. So that's Huerter's number. I broke these down yesterday's vid as well. Duncan Robinson's also making less, and that number was looked at as a bit of an overpay for the Miami Heat for a long time there, but he just had a crazy game for the Heat last night. So, that's sort of the going rate. Am I in love with that contract? No, but that's sort of a number I guess we can expect for Gary Trent Jr. if a deal were to go down. So, I think the open market's going to probably give him that number should the Raptors. Remains to be seen. But the last thing we're taking a look at is another guy that plays the shooting guard position, another guy that's sort of in this boat, and it's Jordan Nwora, who had a solid game against the Orlando Magic last night. Got some praise from Josh Lewenberg, following last night's game, basically saying Jordan Nwora has been one of the bright spots in his 2-game set against the Orlando Magic. He'll need to get better defensively. His future in the NBA depends on it, but the dude can score even against elite NBA defense. 32 points on 12 of 16 shooting, 4-7 from the three-point line in his last 35 minutes. So again, I've been the proponent that we should give Jordan Nwora some more run to see if it's worthwhile to keep him on this team as a potential sort of microwave off the bench. I mean, Nwora, he's had some numbers. He's put up some numbers over the course of his NBA career, particularly that season with the Indiana Pacers, then went down with injury and stuff, and that's just sort of how that season ended up going. But, dealt with some stuff, and, that 2022-2023, dealt with some injuries in that year. But when he was traded to Indiana, averaged 13 points per game. He's a guy that can put up numbers at the NBA level in terms of scoring. Again, the rest of it, as Lewenberg kind of brought up, defense and stuff, I just want to see him play. I want to see him get some opportunities for this team because he's 25 years old now at this point, and this should be really telling in terms of whether or not the team brings it back. So, I mean, Darko Rajokovic has the opportunity to sort of play a lot of these deep bench guys. I feel like Nwora is a dude that's earned a little bit more of a leash, a little bit more opportunity, and we'll see how things end up shaking out. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about all of this Toronto Raptors news. You guys are the best to make it far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. I'm signing out. Cheers.